The state of emergency is in America, not Chicago, and is birthed from this president and his administration. Dr. King said he could not raise his voice against the violence of the oppressed without having first spoken clearly to the greater purveyor of violence, his own country. And those are my words to you, Mr. Trump. Before you dare speak about any violence in Chicago, look into your mirror and address the violence coming from the White House.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. As much as the deportation campaign underway in Chicago is a legal issue, a legal question, a government issue with government questions, and now a military issue with big, huge fundamental questions about our military, it is also at its core a moral and human question for the country. Because these are people, moms and dads, grandparents, kids, getting swept up by armed government agents. People with families and livelihoods and hopes and dreams and plans, and the vast majority of them now without any criminal history. The moral issue is driving some faith leaders to speak out, like Father Michael Pfleger, who you just heard, a pastor from the south side of Chicago. Pope Leo has weighed in. He is from Chicago. He said he would, quote, stand with Catholic leaders in protecting immigrants facing mass deportations in the United States. That is according to a group of American Catholic leaders and advocacy groups he met with at the Vatican Wednesday. And there was this disturbing scene we played for you earlier this week where a minister was among the demonstrators outside the Broadview, Illinois detention center last month when he was hit in the head by a pepper ball and then collapsed to the ground. That man, the Reverend David Black, said about the federal agents this, quote, I told them there is still time to repent, believe the good news, and turn from their wicked ways. That is when they opened fire, end quote. The Department of Homeland Security has since called the protesters agitators, and the department said they were impeding operations at that facility. Reverend Black is among a group of plaintiffs who filed a lawsuit against ICE and just yesterday won a temporary restraining order banning federal agents from using forceful tactics against faith-based and other demonstrators. Yesterday, another notable rebuke came from a Republican, the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, chairman of the National Governors Association. He criticized the deployment of Texas National Guard troops to the state of Illinois as a violation of his belief in federalism and states' rights. And a federal judge also just ruled against the deployment of National Guard in the state. Late yesterday, U.S. District Judge April Perry issued a temporary restraining order blocking the deployment of the National Guard, finding that the Trump administration's directive violates the Constitution and would, quote, only add fuel to the fire that the defendants themselves have started, end quote. The ongoing standoff between Donald Trump's militarized immigration raids in Chicago and the faith, government, and community leaders opposing them is where we begin the hour with the Reverend David Black. He is the minister of the First Presbyterian Church of Chicago, who was shot in the head with pepper balls while praying in front of an ICE facility. Also joining us, pastor of Highland Park Presbyterian Church, the Reverend Quincy Worthington, who has also been at the protests and has endured pepper bullets and tear gas while there. And with me at the table, Democratic strategist and Columbia University professor, MSNBC political analyst Basil Smikle is here. Let me start with you, Reverend Black, because these images at a time when a lot of people feel like too much is coming at them really stopped everything, stopped the conversation. We played them during the broadcast on Wednesday. I received a flood of people who couldn't believe that this had happened. So I guess my first question is how are you? And two, what are we to do with the despair or anger that we felt when we saw this happen to you?
Thank you so much, Nicole. And thank you for asking how I'm doing. I'm recovering. I've had a respiratory issue ever since that attack, and it seems to be connected. To your question about despair, I would just encourage everyone who is watching these protests to witness this as a moment of world building. That these protesters are actively building and rebuilding a democracy where everyone can live where they choose to belong, where our neighbors can return and live at peace in our communities with us.
How do we get to the peace part when we're seeing parents and people who've been here for decades, people who haven't lived in the countries where they are from for decades, snatched off streets and deported?
It's very disturbing. And, people have been witnessing this violence against me and other pastors and press in broad daylight. Trying to imagine what might be happening to our neighbors who have been abducted and are being held in confinement behind closed doors is just horrifying. I find my hope by consistently looking towards the valor and the joy and the peacefulness of the protesters who have been gathering at Broadview. I've been joining them as a minister and as one witnessing the gospel and the hopefulness that brings me. Jesus proclaimed that the end of the world is good news because a new creation is at hand. And I think that new creation is coming to life in America at this moment, to the terror of this administration and ICE agents and people who are clinging to very old and very violent ways.
What do you see in the protests that you describe as joy?
Thank you for asking that. There is such a deep sense of solidarity and mutual aid in these protests. Protesters are gathering in a way that is totally pluralistic and autonomous. This group has no leaders. It has no sponsors. It's a group of people who are in love with their neighbors and in love with their communities and showing up to be in solidarity with people who cannot speak right now, who are hiding in their homes or who have already been abducted and disappeared. I've read that thousands of people have disappeared and cannot be accounted for since they've been kidnapped by ICE. So the people who are gathering are doing it out of a profound sense of love, and we're gathering to sing and pray and chant and sometimes speak words of condemnation. But fundamentally, this is an act of solidarity and a deep desire for those who are inside the facility to know that they are not alone. They can hear our voices and know that we are with them and we are for them, and we will seek justice for them and for them to return to our communities where they belong.
Reverend Worthington, let me bring you in on this. If you could just paint a picture of what you're seeing in your community and what you want people to know who may be disturbed by the images, but we're obviously not standing there with you. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, I think over the past month or so, what I've seen, I can only describe as it's like watching the kingdom of heaven smash against the gates of hell repeatedly. Thinking about your question, I'm always brought back to the quotation from A.J. Musk that there is no way to peace, the way is peace. And what I've witnessed among the group of protesters that I kind of view myself as a chaplain to at this point is people peacefully protesting, practicing their First Amendment rights, fighting for their neighbors as best they can, to be met with such brutality. And instead of responding with hatred or violence of their own, what I witnessed is seeing them fall back, care for one another, flush the pepper spray out of each other's eyes, make sure everyone's okay, and then rally to go back up front to, again, voice their love for their neighbor and the protection of all people in this country. And it's been one of the most horrifying and most beautiful things I have ever seen.
Reverend Worthington, when people ask you if it's safe to be out on the protests or to bring their kids to the protests, what do you say?
I think there are different levels of safety. I would, with the way ICE has been escalating their response to the protests, I caution us to ever say that it's safe there. But I think we do as best we can to provide a peaceful and safe environment. And there are different levels of risk that you can take at these. This morning, we were gathered with clergy from all denominations and walks of life to serve an interfaith communion service at Broadview in the hopes of maybe also being able to take it into the detainees. And the feeling there today, especially after these recent court rulings, was one of joy, was one of hope. There was a lot of dancing. So today was a good day, and it was a very peaceful day. And it would have been something I would have been glad to have anybody join us for.
I mean, Reverend Worthington, I asked you that because I can hear my viewers, and sometimes I read them directly asking me, we're seeing what's happening, but we don't know what to do. And one of the things that I think people want to do is to be in the streets. But I think that the design of the Trump administration is to make them afraid. And that is, at least from the outside, something that they appear to have had some success at. People are afraid. I mean, I just asked you, is it safe? I wonder if you can talk about sort of trade-offs, because it presumes that being at home is safe. And the truth is, for people being hunted by federal agents, they're not safe in their homes either.
Right. And I think kind of what we're witnessing on Chicago is that, even just walking down the street sometimes isn't safe, that we've seen ICE agents throw tear gas indiscriminately onto the road. But what I will say is one thing that this movement has really shown me and teaching me is that there is a role for everyone at every level. We have people who can't be at the protest because of respiratory issues. So they bring water, they bring supplies, they pray for us, they support us in other ways. And so there's many hands to make the work light. And it really does seem like a stone soup situation where everybody finds a need and helps fill it. I've been telling people, even if you can't make it, just praying for the detainees is a huge step, and it is a huge way to go. And I always think about, too, if this is what we're facing on the outside in broad daylight in front of cameras, I can't imagine what may be going on inside these detention centers.